Hello guys, today is March 22nd, almost 2 p.m. And now we're gonna start a new book reading series. We're gonna read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, a book written on 19th century, almost 200 years. We have a preface here. I have endeavored in this ghostly little book to raise the ghost of an idea, which shall not put my readers out of humor with themselves, with each other, with the season, or with me. May it haunt their houses pleasantly, and no one wish to lay it. Their faithful friend and servant, Charles Dickens, December 1843, is 182 years ago, almost bicentenary. I don't know if there is this word in English. I will not look for it right now. Okay, let's start. I have read I have read this book before. I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, and it is in public domain. So I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it now, and let's come back. So I'm gonna read it again now, and now almost 2 minutes, more than 2 minutes, just to rearrange our stuff. I had to I really had to do this. I really had to do this rearrangement, the settings before start um, to record this. But I didn't. So let's go. Um, I have watched the version of the Disney adaptation of this book, where Mickey is the poor, Mr. Scrooge is the rich man who doesn't want any human contact, and Mickey is his assistant, and he's poorly paid and very abused by Mr. Scrooge. And it's a Christmas, and he was visited by three ghosts: the past, the present, and the future, and teaching me a lesson about how he handled his life and how he treat others around him. So let's see. Let's read together. This book is the chapters in this book are very long. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read it until I reach the 10 minute mark in the video, and after that, and I'm gonna look for a reasonable stop when finish when I reach the end of a scene or a thought or a conversation, to make more smooth ending, a smooth transition and between one video and another, one chapter and another, one episode of the series and another. Let's go. Stave 1: Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know, of my own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is this but the wisdom of our but the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country is done for. You will therefore you will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead? Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and Scrooge and he were partners. Were Scrooge and he were partners. Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor. Scrooge was his sole executor. Scrooge was his whole. Scrooge was his whole. Scrooge was his sole executor. Scrooge was his sole executor. Executor. Scrooge, Scrooge was, Scrooge was his sole executor. Scrooge was his sole executor. Scrooge was his sole executor. Scrooge was his sole. Scrooge, Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. Let's try once more. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. Solemnized it, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. If we were not perfectly convi- if we were not perfectly if we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing more remarkable in his taking a stroll at night in an easterly wind upon his own ramparts than there would be in any other middle-aged gentleman rashly turned out after dark in a breezy spot, say St. Paul's churchyard for instance, literally to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted Scrooge Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood years years afterwards above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley. There it stood years afterwards above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, strapping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. And solitary as an oyster, the cold within, the cold within him, the cold within him, the cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head and on his eyebrows, and his righty chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He carried his own low temperature always about him. He carried his own He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced, he iced ice coffee. He iced, he iced, he, it's gonna be a little. He iced, he iced his ice, he iced his, he iced his office in the dog days, and didn't thought it. He iced his office in the dog days, and didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could be warm, no wintry weather chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose. No pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet could boast of the advantage over him in only one respect. They often came down handsomely, and Scrooge never did. Nobody ever stopped him in the streets to say, with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me? When will you come to, my dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind man's dog appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their would tug their would tug their owners into doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye, Dark Master. No eye at all is better than an evil eye. No eye at all is better than an evil eye. No eye at all is better. No eye at all is better than an evil eye, Dark Master. No eye at all is better than an evil eye, Dark Master." But what did Scrooge? But what did Scrooge? But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked. To edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance, was what the knowing ones called nuts to Scrooge. Well, I think this is a reasonable wait time to stop. I think I'm gonna read the. No, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read next. I'm gonna start next chapter from Once Upon a Time. Okay, so that's the end of the first chapter of uh, a Christmas Carol book reading series, a new series of this channel that nobody watches. Until next one.